Hello, it's Scott Manley here with something called Asteroid Update. Asteroid Day comes but once a year, but the asteroids are always out there. And in collaboration with the people behind Asteroid Day, it was decided that it would be a good thing to have a regular spot where we talk about asteroids and, more importantly, talk to some of the amazing people that support Asteroid Day and the idea that the human race should be concerning itself with this extraterrestrial threat. There are people that are scientists, astronauts, artists, and influencers of all kind, and we hope to have them regularly on the show. And this will be a monthly thing. But first, let's say farewell to a great pioneer of small solar system body research. Just a week ago, the European Space Agency finally decided to cut transmissions with the Philae lander. Now, Philae, as you know, was the small lander that went with the Rosetta spacecraft and in November of 2014 tried to land on the surface of Comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko, and I've mispronounced that, but who cares? It unfortunately had some technical problems and bounced a couple of times, landed on its side in a rather shady spot. And with its battery power fading, it did as much science as it could before it ran out of power. About 6 months later, in June and July of 2015, limited contact was re-established for a short amount of time, enabling even more science to be done. But then the probe fell silent once again. And now, a year later, with the Rosetta spacecraft heading out into deep space along with the comet, its battery power, or its solar power, is starting to fade, and to preserve power for other mission goals, it's decided to stop trying to contact the Philae lander. And so we say farewell to it. And in a month or so, we will probably be saying farewell to Rosetta as it attempts to land on the comet itself, a task for which the spacecraft has not been designed. My only advice I can offer is fly safe. And with that farewell out of the way, let's get on to the main event. Earlier this week, I met with one of the icons of astronomical research and an original signatory to the Asteroid Day Declaration. Hello, it's Scott Manley here with Asteroid Update, and this month we are with the amazing, the legendary Jill Tarter.
Hello, Scott.
Of the SETI Institute, amongst other things, right?
Yes, SETI Institute, that's it.
Wow, and so you principally are searching for evidence of alien transmissions coming from space.
That's right. We're trying to answer this really old question, are we alone, by seeing if we can use the tools of the astronomer, so telescopes of different kind, to look for evidence of somebody else's technology. I don't know how to find intelligence at a distance, but maybe we can find technology. And if we find technology, we'll infer intelligent technologists, at least at some point.
This is Asteroid Day TV, Asteroid Update. Why would someone in SETI be interested in asteroids, or why do you think we should be concerned about this?
Well, somebody involved in SETI is very interested in longevity. All right.
The longevity, you mean longevity of civilizations?
I mean longevity of technological civilizations. Because if the rule out there is you pop up, you evolve, you develop a technological civilization, and then you use that technology to your detriment, you know, blow yourselves up, you destroy your environment, whatever, and you go off the air very shortly after you go on the air, then we're not going to find anybody, and that's not a very good story for our future. But if, on the other hand, we find a signal, then we know that on average out there, technology must be stabilizing, and longevity is enormous, so that we can have a long future. And when you begin to think about long futures, long compared to a human lifetime, then you begin to worry about all of the environmental factors that could shorten that lifetime. And asteroids are one of the really important natural disasters that we have to think about, and one of the few that we can do something about.
Asteroids can have huge effects, but they're the only real natural disaster that we can predict and potentially prevent.
Right.
and it makes them unique. And you were talking about how politics really doesn't like, it's not very good at investing in these rare, high consequence potential events. But you were talking about up in the northwest coast.
In Cascadia, right, where they can predict with a certain amount of statistical confidence that there is going to be a huge earthquake caused by subduction and a subsequent tsunami, because they see the evidence in the rocks that this has happened before.
Every few hundred years, right?
Yes, and so they can, with fair confidence, say it's going to happen again. And at least in this instance, that group of individuals has been willing to pay now in order to provide a potential safety net for that future when that event happens. And we don't do that very often as humans. We're very short-sighted. We're very poor at spending money now in order to prevent or mediate future disaster.
Coming back to SETI, that is an interesting thing to be spending money on as well, right? It's obviously like one of the biggest questions, and the payoff, well, at least as a cultural payoff, is potentially huge. But yeah, I mean, obviously you're invested in this.
Yes, I'm very invested in it.
I mean, how long have you been working on SETI?
Well, since I was a graduate student, actually.
Wow.
So it's been my whole career, and it's been a privilege. And it's been an incredible roller coaster ride in terms of the financing and funding. But SETI's like a lottery, right? The payoff is enormous, but you don't really know what the odds are. And nevertheless, I think we should invest a little. We shouldn't invest an enormous amount because we actually don't necessarily know what the right thing to do is. We know what we can do today, and we're trying to use the tools of the 21st century as strategically and as cleverly as we can. But the right physics, the right thing to look for, may be something we haven't yet invented. In which case, the only strategy is to stay around long enough to get smart enough to invent that and then start using it. So we really do have a vested interest in this idea of a long future for humanity.
Yeah, you're looking in radio waves, right? That's what
SETI
you're looking
today
at right now.
is using both radio telescopes and optical telescopes,
okay.
looking for different kinds of signals that are artifacts, that are obviously engineered, something that Mother Nature can't produce, at least as far as we know.
Right, and the classic example in the book Contact is the prime numbers getting pinged out.
That's
which is,
right.
Yes. But when you're looking in the radio waves, you're essentially you are looking for these signals that are artificial. And for a long time, human civilization, for the last 100 years or so, we've been putting out very interesting signals, I guess. But they've changed over time as well. Has that changed your strategy as we've gone from more narrowband transmissions into spread spectrum?
Well, we're still looking for artifacts, partly because the amount of computation that's required is less to find these very artificial signals than it is to find signals that are information rich and look a lot more like noise or astrophysical signals. But as the computation becomes available and affordable, we're actually branching out. We're looking at how we can detect somebody else's information-rich signals from our own and from a natural background. And it's simply a question of how many operations per second you can afford to throw at the problem. And in my case, at the SETI Institute, we put a premium on doing our signal processing in near real time so that when there's a signal there, we can follow up on it. Because we know from long experience that interference, our own technologies, vary on every possible timescale. And so if we don't jump on the signal right away, we think that there's a really good chance that at some later date, that signal won't be there for us to go back and pick up and figure out what it was. So again, we are unique in our emphasis on doing the signal processing in real time. So that really puts an enormous premium on compute power.
And Moore's law has obviously helped you a great deal on this, right? So
Certainly
how
has.
long has SETI been using?
Well, since 1960,
So back when
when
Gordon
Frank
Moore
Drake
was,
did the first radio search, we can say with confidence that our search has become more comprehensive by at least 15 orders of magnitude, 15 factors of 10.
Factors of 10 rather than 2.
Right,
Because
right.
Moore's law is about doubling.
Well, no, this is orders of magnitude, so 10 to the 15.
Proper orders of magnitude
which
here.
which is really large.
That's a lot of zeros.
Right, but it's going to be a lot more in the near future because we're on this exponential. And even I think most of your audience understands that with doubling of capability every year and a half, 2 years, all the good stuff happens at the end, right?
Yeah.
You can do, in a couple of years, you can do everything you've done before, plus a lot more quickly.
Doesn't that doesn't that imply that procrastination wins? The longer you wait, the less time you have to work.
The longer we wait, maybe the easier it becomes. On the other hand, Columbus didn't wait for 747 to get across the ocean, right? He had some technology which was just barely good enough, and it got the job done. And we could wait, but then we lose potentially a significant period of time where a positive result could in fact feed back on our cultural evolution in a way that might help ensure that we make it through this technological adolescence that we're in, and that we have a long future. So I think the answer to the question can't come too soon. It's an old question, but the answer will be very impactful, and I'd like it tomorrow rather than a century from now.
The Drake's equation is one of these things that figures heavily into SETI, and since the kind of advent of the original SETI program and plans and everything since, science has changed. Has it changed any of the major parameters in the Drake's equation?
Oh, well, first of all, you have to remember that that equation is really an agenda for a meeting. So it isn't like equals mc squared or any other equation you might be familiar with. There's really no right answer, and it's impossible to calculate anything with it because the input into it is so much guesswork. Nevertheless, the astronomical and astrobiological pieces of the equation have undergone significant evolution since Frank Drake first wrote that down. So for me, over my lifetime, there have been two real game changers in this field. And that is exoplanets, right? The knowledge now that we have that almost every star has more than one planet, right? So planets exist around stars other than our sun. I didn't know that when I was a graduate student. And the other thing is extremophiles. These are organisms that live in environments that when I was a graduate student, we would have said no chance that life could exist in boiling battery acid, beneath the surface of the earth, miles into the crust, without sunlight, at the bottom of the ocean, where there's enormous pressures and temperatures. But indeed, we couldn't exist there. Those aren't conditions that we would like. But evolution has managed to tailor all kinds of organisms to be fat and happy in these environments.
To exploit the resources that are exclusively available to them.
So I think we're finally giving microbes the respect that they deserve, and we're finally beginning to have a more reasonable approach to evolution and lose the language such as ascent of man and the pinnacle of evolution, all of this stuff, we're gaining at the microbial level a real understanding of how evolution works. And so now we can appreciate that life has occupied all these amazing niches on our planet. And you put that together with the fact that there are now lots of other planets out there. So there's a lot of real estate. And given the extremophiles, we believe that maybe a lot more of that real estate may be habitable than we once thought. And so now our challenge is to go from habitable worlds to finding those worlds that are actually inhabited. That's where astrobiology is today. And once we begin to understand how often life gets started, then we can perhaps take the next step and figure out how often intelligence is part of life elsewhere. And of that intelligence, what fraction of it ever develops a technology and communicates. And then the really most important and most unknown factor of Frank Drake's equation is the longevity. How long does that technological communicative civilization continue to use the technology?
And, or continue to allow it to, say, leak into space.
Right.
Right?
Because, if out there the rule is that life, intelligence, technological civilizations crop up all the time, but the technology is used in a way to blow themselves up or destroy their environment or whatever, the technologies are short-lived, then we're never going to succeed with SETI.
Yeah. Or it's possible that they turn inwards, and this is, of course, the Fermi Paradox is another kind of question that's floating around out there.
But the opposite's also a possibility, that technological capabilities may ultimately be stabilizing for a civilization and provide it with the ability to shepherd its planetary resources. So SETI is interested in a long future for our species, and we are very much aware that one thing that could end that species is asteroid impacts. But we have a space program. The dinosaurs didn't. I think we would be really not doing our duty if we allowed this natural disaster, which we potentially can mitigate, to go unmitigated.
Okay, so there you have it. SETI is actually interested in killer asteroids. And Jill, we really appreciate your support.
I think that the 100X pledge is a really good goal. We have some new technologies coming online. We ought to fund and support them so we can get this job done and figure out what rocks out there have our name on it far enough in advance so we can do something about it.
Once again, thanks very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Scott.
Fly safe.
Well, there you have it. Thanks to Jill for her time and her wise words. Now, this is going to be a monthly show, and you out there have a chance to contribute. In collaboration with the European Space Agency, we are offering one winner per month, a t-shirt from the Asteroid Impact mission, modelled here by Dr. Brian May, legendary rock guitarist from the band Queen and, of course, co-founder of Asteroid Day, who will be signing these shirts as well. So to win this shirt, you have to ask a question via Twitter with the AIM Mission hashtag, and the best question every month will be answered by an expert as part of the show. So start asking those questions and we'll hopefully get answering them. And I will see you all in future episodes of Asteroid Update. Until then, I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.